Hello, everyone. My name is Miss Vines. I am a first grade teacher, and I'm actually here in my classroom today. This is where I'm most comfortable at. This is where I love to teach. Unfortunately, my students are not here, and I'm sure you all are at home also because of everything going on right now with coronavirus. I know it can be a little bit scary and a little bit intimidating, but I'm glad that we still have opportunities like this to learn from each other and to have fun with each other, try new things. I know it's different, but we can make the best of it while we can. Today, I would like to invite you to come along on this poetry adventure with me. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy it. I love poetry. I don't know what kind of experience you may have with poetry. You may like it. You may not like it. You may not even know if you like it or if you don't. You may have prior experience writing poetry, or you may have none at all. Whatever the case, everyone is welcome. Anything is fine. We're going to learn new things together today, and I hope you just enjoy it and have fun with it. I mentioned I love poetry. I've always loved poetry. It's always been a big part of my life ever since I was a young girl, and it was just something that I kind of was drawn to. I never really had anyone push me towards poetry or anything like that. It was just something I was always drawn to. My papa's always written poetry, written poems for my grandmother. My dad writes poetry, but I fell in love with it myself, I think. My favorite place to write poetry was in nature, in the woods. I would go up. My house has a lot of woods around it, a lot of trees and things, and every time I wanted to write a poem, I would grab my notebook and I would go outside and I would run up behind my house and I would sit on a log or a rock or anything I could find. And sometimes I would just sit and wait. I mean, I didn't have anything that I knew of I could write about. I had no topics. I had no ideas. And I would sit and I would wait for something to come to me. And I would make observations, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today, making these observations in nature to help us write poetry. Poetry doesn't have to be about nature. It can be about anything. Poetry, one of the great things about it is it can be about any topic, anything you love, anything you're interested in, questions you have, anything you wonder. It can be about anything. And that's one of the things I always loved about poetry. So I hope you all enjoy this lesson today, and I hope you learned something new. And don't be intimidated by poetry. I think when we hear that word, we think, oh, I have to be a poet to write poetry. Well, you don't. Anyone is a poet. Everyone is a poet. You have poetry inside of you. It just has to come out. And you just have to figure out a way to do that. And it can be in all sorts of ways. The first thing I would like to do is tell you about one of my favorite collections of poetry, which is Forest Has a Song by Ludwig Vanderwater. Ludwig Vanderwater is a wonderful poet, and this is a book of not all of her poems, but a collection of her poems that she has written about nature, her observations in nature, which is what we're going to do today. We're going to pick a poem in here, we're going to read it together, we're going to look at it, and then we're going to get to write our own poetry at the end of this lesson today. Ludwig Vanderwater has a website called the Poem Farm. It's a wonderful website. She has some great resources on there, and I will be sure to link that for you guys so you can go check it out, see what she has on there. But the first thing I want to do is just go through this book with you guys and talk about it with you. It is a collection of poems about nature, and it starts off with a poem called Invitation. And much like this poem, the forest is inviting the young girl and her dog to come in, to come into the forest and see what's around her. It says, "I'm here, come visit, please." And much like this forest is inviting her to come in, I'm inviting you to come in. I want to invite you to step into this world of poetry that you may know or you may have never known and you would like to see. But just like this book starts out with an invitation, I would like to start this lesson out with an invitation, inviting you to join me on this poetic adventure. The next few poems, this one is titled Dead Branch. You can write a poem about a dead branch. It's something she saw, she noticed, and wrote a poem about it. It's a short poem. Spongy, springy stick, she says. She has a poem about a chickadee. And the girl has a conversation with the chickadee, and she wants the chickadee to come to her, but there's also a part where the chickadee has his own thoughts. And he's a little frightened because he's never talked to a little girl before. There's a poem called Forest News. And it looks like the girl notices the tracks in the snow, and it tells her something about what's going on in the forest that day. April Waking. It's a poem about fiddleheads who unfurl curls from dirty beds. There's one called Fossil. Proposal, about a frog who's looking for a little froggy wife. Lady Slipper. And the girl asks the slipper, "Were you at the forest ball?" Spider. Dusk, which is the time of day. Legends. First Flight, about an owl. "Mommy, I'm scared to be this high." Maybe you've been scared of something before, and maybe, the little girl might have a connection to the owl. Maybe she was scared of something, and she kind of knows how that owl feels, its first time flying. Moss, barefoot on this emerald carpet, toe by toe I squish across. Bone Pile, which is the poem we are going to read today. Wintergreen, waiting for a deer, quietly, silently, quietly I'm sitting here. Home, about a rotten log. Puff, about a mushroom. Warning, poison has 3 leaves, beware. Do you think you know what she's talking about? I think she's talking about poison ivy. A woodpecker. Maples in October. Squirrel. I promise not to tell. I keep a promise very well. Song. Snowflake voices. Colorful actor, about a cardinal. And farewell. Forest breathes a spicy breeze. Forest breathes a spicy breeze. All these poems are based on this girl's observations as she walks through the forest. The forest invites her in, she walks through, and she notices all these things. There's poems about animals, about the plants she sees, the breeze, the seasons. Everything she notices, she is able to write a poem about it. And the poem that I would like for us to read together today is Bone Pile. And before we read Bone Pile, I want you to try to get a picture in your head of a bone pile. Just imagine you're out walking somewhere, there's a bone pile. I want you to imagine that you see it. And listen to this poem as I read, and then we're going to read it together. And I'm going to share my screen with you guys so you can actually see the poem too. But I'm going to read it out of my book first. Bone Pile. I wonder, were you someone's meal? I wonder, were you old? I wonder, did you freeze to death last winter in the cold? I wonder how you'd tell the tale. I wonder if you could. I wonder who will bury you. I wonder if I should. And it shows her dog, and he's looking at the bone pile. Maybe he's smelling it. Now I want us to look at this poem together. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys so you can see the same thing I'm doing. Okay, let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay. Here's our book, Forest Has a Song, and this is going to be our mentor text today. And a mentor text is like a guide that we use to help us write something. Today it's going to be our mentor text for poetry, because we all need a teacher. We all need a guide to go off of. And we're going to use the work of Amy Ludwig Vanderwater as our guide today to help us to write our own poetry. All right, we're going to read this again, and I want you all to follow along with me. Bone Pile by Amy Ludwig Vanderwater. I wonder, were you someone's meal? I wonder, were you old? I wonder, did you freeze to death last winter in the cold? I wonder how you'd tell the tale. I wonder if you could. I wonder who will bury you. I wonder if I should. So I want you to think about that for a minute. I want you to look at this poem, look at the words, think about the meanings. I want you to think about it. And we are going to go through some questions together to help us think about it a little bit more. All right. The first thing I want to ask you is, what do you notice about the poem? What stands out for you and what catches your interest? So I want you to think, when I read this poem, I think of, what do you think of? I want you to pause the video, take out a notepad, or your writer's notebook, jot some things down about what you notice about the poem. What stands out to you and what catches your interest? When you hear this poem, when you read this poem, when you look at this poem, what stands out to you about it? So go ahead and pause the video, jot down your ideas, and then come back and we're going to go through this some more. Our next question is, what feelings or emotions does this poem awaken? How does the poem make you feel? Does this poem make you feel happy? Does it make you feel sad? Does it make you feel confused, like you don't really know what it's about? Does it make you feel curious? How does this poem make you feel? So when I read this poem, I feel, go ahead and pause the video again and write down how this poem makes you feel. All right, our next question is, does the poem remind you of anything from your life? So does this bring back any memories of your own life that you can think of? Something that happened to you that relates to this poem? When I read this poem, I'm reminded of, and it might not even be something that's happened to you, maybe something you've seen, another observation you've made. Is there anything that you can connect to your own life through this poem? Pause the video again, write down any connections you have or any memories you have that may be tied to this poem. Do you have any questions about this poem? Does this poem cause you to wonder about anything? She says in her poem, I wonder, were you someone's meal? I wonder, were you old? She has questions in this poem. She was walking through the forest, she saw this bone pile, and she had all these questions. She wondered maybe how the bone pile had gotten there. She had all these questions that she turned into a poem. So when you read this poem, what do you wonder about it? What do you wonder about the poem? What do you have questions about? Pause the video again, take out your writer's notebook or your notepad, and jot down some questions you have. Now, how do you know this is a poem? When you look at this, what makes you say, oh, that's a poem? How do we know it's a poem? Pause the video again, jot down how you think you might know it's a poem, or think about it. What do you notice about the way the poet writes? Look at the way she has her words, the way she orders her lines, the words that she uses, the vocabulary words that she uses, maybe punctuation. What do you notice about how she writes? What patterns do you see? Do you see a pattern in this poem? Is there something that she might use over and over? Does she use a pattern in how she places her lines and her sentences? How important or significant do you think the title is to the poem? So the name of the poem is Bone Pile. Do you think it's important that we know what the title of this poem is? So if we didn't have the title, just say we saw this poem. And let's look at it one more time and think about it. I wonder, were you someone's meal? I wonder, were you old? I wonder, did you freeze to death last winter in the cold? I wonder how you'd tell the tale. I wonder if you could. I wonder who will bury you. I wonder if I should. If we didn't have the title, would we know what the poem is about? Do you think the title is important, or do you think it's not so important? What do you notice about the beginning and ending of the poem? Is there anything different about the beginning than there is the ending? Are they the same that she uses to kind of sandwich the poem together? What do you notice about that? Does this poet do anything special with the words? Does she do anything special with the shape or the form of the poem? Is it the way she orders them? Is it the way she lengthens her sentences? Does she do anything special? Pause the video and take a look. Are there words that stand out for you or surprise you, or maybe words you don't understand? Are there words that maybe don't belong, or maybe that you find interesting or you have questions about? Is there a word that you don't understand? If there is a word you don't understand, or maybe you've never heard before, write it down on a piece of paper. Is there anything that surprises you? Pause the video and write that down also. What pictures do you see in your mind? So what I want you to do, once again, pause the video, read the poem again. Well, I'll read it to you first. And as I read it, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to think about what you see in your mind. Feel free to draw. Feel free to jot down what you see in your head. What pictures do you see? As I read it one more time. I wonder, were you someone's meal? I wonder, were you old? I wonder, did you freeze to death last winter in the cold? I wonder how you'd tell the tale. I wonder if you could. I wonder who will bury you. I wonder if I should. So pause the video, jot down any ideas you have, or draw any pictures that you see in your mind. All of these questions help us to understand poetry and to also become better poets ourselves. What is the poet talking about here? What do you think the poet is trying to say? When you read this poem, what do you think the poet is trying to say? When we ask ourselves these questions as we read poetry, it helps us as readers, it helps us as poets, and it helps to guide our understanding a little bit better. So what do you think the poet is talking about here? Take a moment, pause the video, and write down what you think. Now we are going to take a closer look at this poem, and I'm going to share with you some of the things that I noticed about it. So, and I know this looks crazy right now, but I used some different colors to highlight some different things that I noticed, and we're going to go through this together. So one of the first things I noticed when I read this poem was repetition. Means she used the same two words over and over, which I have highlighted in blue. Throughout the poem, she uses the phrase, I wonder. She uses it, let's count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times throughout her poem about things that she wonders. So I noticed repetition, and I also noticed that she asks questions. So she makes it evident that she's curious about this, okay? And a poem, it doesn't have to be things that we know is true. A poem can be questions that we have, things that we don't always understand. And she makes that evident in her poem here. She asks, I wonder, were you someone's meal? Were you old? Did you freeze to death last winter in the cold? How you would tell the tale. Can you tell the tale? I wonder if you could. And who will bury you? I wonder if I should. So she asks questions. And I also noticed, which I've highlighted in pink, she uses something called alliteration, which is 2 words that start with the same letter or sound. And in this case, the two words that she used are also homonyms. And a homonym or homonyms are two words that sound the same but are spelled differently and have different meanings. So tail and tail, they sound the same, but they are spelled differently. They have two different meanings. The first tell, T-E-L-L, means to tell something. We know what that means, to share information. And the next tell, T-A-L-E, means a story. So she says, I wonder how you'd tell the tale. She wonders how the bone pile would tell its story of how it got there, how it ended up being a bone pile. She wonders how whatever it was would tell the story. Which I've also highlighted in green, the word tell, a word wizard word, which might be a word that we don't really know the meaning of, a word that's not used a lot, but the word tale in this case means a story. I also noticed that she uses rhymes in her poem, and poems don't have to rhyme. Did you know that? Lots of times we think they have to rhyme, but they don't have to rhyme. I personally think it's nice when poems rhyme. I like the way they sound. I enjoy writing poems that rhyme, but they don't have to rhyme. That's the beauty of poetry. They can rhyme, they don't have to rhyme. Parts of a poem can rhyme, other parts don't have to. But I did notice that the words that she uses in her poems rhyme, like old and cold. I wonder, were you old? I wonder, did you freeze to death last winter in the cold? I also noticed she uses could and should. I wonder if you could. I wonder who will bury you. I wonder if I should. I also noticed that she included short lines in her poem. So her lines are not very long. I wonder is very short. She puts it in one place by itself. Were you someone's meal is short. All of her lines down through here are short lines. And I also noticed, and in this case, I'm calling it personification because you guys can help me out here and tell me what you think also. So I've highlighted in gray the word you. She uses the word you. And to me, it's like she's talking to the bone pile. She says, I wonder, were you someone's meal? I wonder, were you old? I wonder, did you freeze to death last winter in the cold? She's asking it questions. She's talking to the bone pile like it's a person. Or she could be talking to it like it's an animal. I wrote personification, but she could be talking to it like it was an animal. She could be talking to it like it was a person. She didn't really know what it was. That's why she was asking all these questions. That's why she was so curious. She didn't know what it was. But I did notice that she used the word you, and she was almost having a one-way conversation. Obviously the bone pile wasn't talking back. They weren't having dialogue between each other. But she was talking to the bone pile. She was asking it questions. And why do you think she used this word you? Who do you think she's talking to? Do you think maybe she's talking to an animal? Do you think she thinks she's talking to a person? Or maybe she doesn't know? What do you think? But these are just some different things that I noticed about this poem when I read it, and now that I've thought about it, and after I asked myself some of those guiding questions that I ask you all. So now I am going to share with you my own I Wonder poem. And we have read the poem together. We are using Amy Ludwig Vanderwater's poem, Bone Pile, as our mentor text or as our guide. We're going to use her poem, and we are going to create a poem similar to hers, with the same style, the same words, kind of the same patterns that she uses to help us to learn how to create our own poetry. But first, I want to share with you how I created my own I Wonder poem. I love this poem. I love the style of it. I love the sound of it, the rhyme of it. I love how she created this poem. So let me move myself here so you can see what I'm talking about. So the first thing I want to share with you all is the first step I took into making my own I Wonder poem. So number one, I took what I've been calling a wonder walk. And a wonder walk is, this is the wonder walk I took. So I walked outside around my house and I took my writer's notebook with me, and I wanted to be like the girl in the book. I walked into nature and I started making these observations. So I started writing down what I saw and what I wondered. So you can see here I've included my notes that I took on my wonder walk outside into nature, and I wrote down what I saw. I saw trees, grass, flowers, bees, a butterfly, sunshine, clouds. I just tried to write down what I noticed around me. And I was especially drawn to this butterfly, and which is what I took a picture of here. This is a flower bush in front of my house. It's my mother. She planted it there. And I noticed this butterfly there, and I had all these questions in my mind when I was observing this butterfly. And so I wrote down what I wondered. What questions did I have about the butterfly? And my questions were, do butterflies sleep? I never thought about that before. I thought, what really happens to butterflies when it's nighttime and, I'm asleep in my bed? Where do they go? Do they have a home they go to? I put, where do they live? Do they have a home? Do they get married? Do they have a spouse waiting for them at home, when they go back home every evening? Or do they have a home? What happens to them at nighttime? I had this flood of questions in my mind, so I quickly wrote them down. And once I had jotted down what I saw and what I wondered, I began to write my rough draft of my own I Wonder poem. But I think the first step should always be to make an observation and to ask those questions that will help you create your poem. So, okay, sorry. I can't get the next slide to come on. So here's the rough draft of my poem, which I titled Butterfly Home. And I looked at my notes and I began to draft my poem. And as you can see, I drafted my poem based on Amy Ludwig Vanderwater's poem, Bone Pile. I used some of the same words and repetition that she used, and I asked some questions. Another thing that I did, she used the word you when she was talking to the bone pile. I used the word you as if I was talking to the butterfly, asking it these questions like it could answer me. So I tried to use that same style that she used. I'm using the word you. I'm using I wonder. I'm asking these questions. And I also try to keep my lines the same as hers. So this is my draft. And I use my notes and my questions to guide me, as well as Amy Ludwig Vanderwater's poem, Butterfly Home. I wonder, do you have a home? That was one of my questions. One of my questions was, do butterflies have homes? So I tried to turn that into a poetic line. I wonder, do you have a home? I wonder, do you sleep? Once I wrote the question, do you have a home, I thought, well, if they do have a home, I also wonder if butterflies sleep. I think that was one of my questions for my notes. I wonder where you go at night. What secrets do you keep? So when I was thinking about if they had a home, obviously I thought, they're out in the daytime, but where do they go in the nighttime? And what secrets do you keep? I thought, if I don't know all these things and I never see a butterfly out at nighttime, I wondered, are they keeping secrets? So I wrote that down. I wonder if you have a bed or if you sleep alone. I wonder if you share your secret tiny little home. So another thing I borrowed from Amy Ludwig Vanderwater is the way she rhymes her poem. And one thing I noticed also that I should have included in my annotation was the syllable she uses. So if you look at this poem closely, let's actually go back to her poem. Let's go back to Amy Ludwig Vanderwater's poem. Okay, I wonder were you someone's meal? So first she always starts with I wonder. That's what stays. Were you someone's meal? I tried to use the same amount of words or the same syllables in my second line also. So let's count the syllables in that second line. Were you someone's meal? 5 syllables. And in my poem, do you have a home? 5 syllables. I tried to keep that same pattern going. You don't have to do that, but that's something that I chose to do. So I wonder, do you have a home? I wonder, do you sleep? And in her fourth line, she also uses 3 syllables. I wonder where you go at night. What secrets do you keep? I tried to still follow those same syllables. I wonder if you have a bed or if you sleep alone. I wonder if you share your secret tiny little home. And then I think I kind of go off and I kind of add my own spin to it, which is perfectly fine. I think it's good if we use mentor text and we add our own spin to it. And we create something that is modeled after maybe another poet, another poem, but also add something in there that we want to, that adds a special touch from us. So this was the second stage of writing my poem. And then the third thing I did was, I might need to move myself again. Well, I think you all can see. It's just covering up my poem a little bit. So I included a picture of my rough draft, and then I included my final draft of my poem, A Butterfly Home by Lauren Vines, after Amy Ludwig Vanderwater. And when we write a poem that is modeled after another poet's work, it's important that we include after and then the author's name, so to give credit to them and to give credit to the poem. So after I wrote my draft, I wrote my final draft and arranged the lines how I wanted them, arranged the sentences how I wanted it to look. So we're going to read it one more time. Butterfly home. I wonder, do you have a home? I wonder, do you sleep? I wonder where you go at night. What secrets do you keep? I wonder if you have a bed or if you sleep alone. I wonder if you share your tiny, secret little home. So I changed up a few words at the end. Instead of writing if you share your secret tiny little home, I changed it to if you share your tiny secret little home. And we can do that. We can revise and we can edit our drafts as many times as we need to get it exactly how we wanted it. But I did try to keep my lines the same as hers. I have I wonder in every line. And I want you to think about what craft moves I borrowed from Amy Ludwig Vanderwater. And craft moves are those techniques that she used. What did she use in her poetry that I used in my poetry? And it is okay to use other poems as a guide. That's very important for us to do as growing and learning poets. And so I want you to think about it. I want you to look at my poem, think about her poem, pause the video, and write down some things I use that are similar to Amy Ludwig Vanderwater. Now it is your turn to write your own I Wonder poem. I think this is a fun activity. The first thing I want you to do, and I invite you to do, let me move myself again, is to take your own wonder walk. And I took my wonder walk outside. And, this book is about nature. She takes a walk through the forest, but I'm not going to limit you to nature. I decided to take my walk through nature because that's what I like. That's what I enjoy. So take a walk outside. Or if maybe going outside is not really an option right now, take a walk through your house. Go through your house. Take your notebook or your writer's notebook and jot down some things you notice about your home. Some things that catch your interest, things that make you wonder, things that make you curious. Write down questions that you have, things you want to know the answers to. So you could take a walk outside, you could take a walk in your house, wherever it is that you may be. I also invite you to have the option to take a wonder walk in your mind. Your mind can take you anywhere. Your mind can take you places your legs cannot take you. And right now, we're all pretty much confined at home. We can't get on an airplane. We can't fly to Africa or China or Hawaii or any place like that. But let your mind take you someplace, and maybe a place you love, a place you've been before. Often when I write poetry, I take wonder walks in my mind to the beach, on the beach. I love the beach. I love the ocean. I love everything about it. And so oftentimes when I write poetry, I take wonder walks in my mind to the beach. Um, but you have all these options. Walk outside, walk in your house, take a wonder walk in your mind. So let your mind take you somewhere. What do you see in your mind? What are you thinking? What are you wondering? What questions pop up as you have these pictures in your mind? And use your writer's notebook or your notepad to jot down your ideas and jot down your questions. So I took my notebook out and I took a walk through the yard, and you saw, I wrote down what I saw and I wrote down the questions that I have, and I was able to turn those observations into poetry, much like Amy Ludwig Vanderwater did. She turned those observations into poetry, which is exactly what we all can do. So once you jot down your ideas, draw pictures, take notes, go ahead and write your draft of your poem as you're walking around, as you're making these observations, whatever you want to do. Then, or if you haven't written your draft already as you walk, use your notes to compose your draft, much like I did. Compose the draft of what you write, and then make your final draft. Think about what moves you're borrowing from Amy Ludwig Vanderwater, much like I did, and write your own I Wonder poem. I want you to use the word I wonder, include questions in there. It can be about anything. It can be about anything you notice or have made observations about or have questions about. And then when you're done, you are welcome to post your poem to our Padlet. I've got my poem posted there. I would love to see everyone's poetry that they've created through this lesson. I hope you all have enjoyed this. This is something you were invited to do. It's something I don't want you to feel pressure to do, but something I want you to have fun with, and something I want you to enjoy. And through this, I want you to discover that you are a poet. You have it in you. We all do. You're a poet. You can write poetry. And I think Amy Ludwig Vanderwater has some great examples that we can go by, and we can use those things to come up with our own poetry. But I hope that you have enjoyed this lesson and that you are able to take it and do with it, and you love poetry, you develop a passion for poetry. But I thank you for joining me today, and I hope you have fun on your wonder walks wherever they may be, and just always remember that you do have a poem inside of you. It just has to come out. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video. Thank you all for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful day.